Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. I'm Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, and my pronouns are he, him. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 80, a big 80, Kavad I.
Can't believe we've been doing this for 80 episodes. That's ridiculous.
We've been doing this for 80 years, Sariel.
It's
been a long
80
time.
years. One episode per
Okay.
year, I think we would be a bit lost.
Yes, that would be a lot, but hey, we could do a podcast in real time and just say, this is what happened exactly 1,500 years ago, but, that's an option for someone else. But yeah, so, Sarah, what do you remember from last time? What are your expectations for Kavad I?
Okay, so we did surprisingly okay on the last episode. Still not, well, but better than I expected.
Surprisingly okay is a good description, yes.
And given the fact that you've been telling me that this will be a long episode for the past, 3 weeks, I assume that things will go fine? Or everything will go so terribly, but we have all the details, which is not usually what happens,
I will say we have a lot of detail, but hey, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm expecting another, who was it, Antiochus III or so?
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Let's see.
We'll find out. So yeah, I'd say you can start with a brief recap of what happened in our past episodes. So the last episode was dealing with the aftermath of the death of Peroz I. He had lost 3 times against the Hephthalites. Last time he was killed and lost most of the army, which caused a massive mess and chaos and destruction in the empire. Then Balash came to the throne, and he didn't really do much, but the noble Sukra managed to defeat the Hephthalites, send them back where they came from, and save the empire from destruction. He then proceeded to basically become the puppet master behind the throne and control Balash for as long as he needed.
Mm-hmm.
Then Balash failed to satisfy Sukra's standards, so he was deposed and replaced with his nephew Kavad.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have a look at what Kavad does and how does he deal with everything and what's going on with this young boy, because he is young. He is quite young indeed. He is so young that in his original coins he has no beard, just a small mustache.
Wow. A small mustache? Or I'm excited to see the teenager mustache.
So okay, Kavad was the son of Peroz I and was probably born sometime in 473, thereabouts. Which means that when his father lost his second war against the Hephthalites and was forced to leave Kavad behind as collateral for his ransom, Kavad was probably just a small child who was left far away from everything he knew.
This was the
among
prince
the people who had defeated
who
his
got
fathers.
given to the Hephthalites.
That's right, yes. Hephthalites.
Hephthalites. Sorry.
So, yeah, Kavad spent some time growing up among the Hephthalites. He will have met some of their princes. He was probably treated reasonably well, like an honored guest. He's not like a dungeon or anything, but it's not ideal being kept as a hostage where if your father tries anything, we'll kill you.
Yeah,
That's
no.
not good. That's
they'll
not
treat
nice.
you well until then, but that could always happen, right? So you're at the mercy
you
of
never know.
your father's actions.
Pretty much.
Although, to be fair, you're always kind of at the mercy of your father's actions. If your father is the king, especially.
Yeah, that's fair. That is part of the deal of how monarchy works, but yeah. So after a while, Kavad was eventually sent back by the Hephthalites to the Sassanid Empire, which means that Peroz was able to start his last war and then get himself killed.
Yay. Yippee.
All this happened when Kavad was about 11 years old. So you can understand why the nobles didn't choose the 11-year-old Kavad as King of Kings in the time of the worst crisis of the Empire, and they just chose Balash, who was basically fine, I guess.
I'm surprised that the nobles had an intelligent decision here.
Yeah, they had enough foresight that
They were like,
let's
maybe this
just
will not be the greatest, you know.
Yeah, like, we want a puppet, but not that much. We want a puppet who can sort of independently move and do things.
An action figure.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as we saw, Uncle Balash seems to have been a good person in general, like a nice guy, but not a very good king. So eventually, after only 4 years, the nobles, and Sukra in particular, decided to replace him and put Kavad on the throne. At the ripe old age of 15, which means that he is technically an adult, so good, I guess it
so
counts
no complaints,
now.
right?
Yeah. Although, as we saw during the reign of Shapur II, there's no real prohibition against a child being king.
No, it's just a bad
better
idea in general.
Yeah, it's just not a good plan. Another interesting thing about Kavad's family is that Sukra may have been his maternal uncle, which gives us extra reasons for him being chosen over anybody else who was in the empire, because it seems like Kavad had some older brothers. Some of them were killed with Peros, but it's possible some were still standing around.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he is Sukra's nephew makes things a lot nicer and smoother for the puppet master. Although, weirdly enough, there is one version of the story, some later Arabic sources, that tell us that Kavad was adopted by the Hephthalite queen, who was also his aunt because she was captured when Peros died. And then he used the Hephthalite army to take the throne and depose Balash. But I personally doubt that, because it looks like a copy of a later event in history, and it also puts Kavad in a much stronger position than what he actually had.
I see.
Because if he marched into the empire at the head of an army, then that's a much stronger position than being the next puppet in a list of many.
Yeah.
And it looks like he is behaving as if he were the puppet in a list of many.
I see.
So Kavad comes to the throne, and he has not much to do, honestly. Like, the empire's still in crisis, but it looks like every time somebody needs something from the king, or every time somebody needs a new law or something like that, they don't go up to Kavad. They just go up to Sukra and say, hey, Sukra, we need this thing. Could you please help us out?
Interesting.
And it looks like it was so overt that Kavad was sitting in court and Sukra was next to him, and people would just ignore Kavad and just walk up to Sukra and tell him whatever they need to tell him. So that's not great.
Oof, that's a bad look.
That's not nice. Even just dispensing with the idea of being a puppet, you're just set dressing. You're just waiting there.
Yep.
It's not anything good.
That's rough. Yeah, that's really disrespectful. So
yeah,
I can assume he didn't take it super well.
So yeah, what would you do if you were Kavad at this point? You are less than a puppet.
Yeah, try to assert myself as the king somehow, right?
Well, how would you do that?
Well, first I need to see if I have supporters, if people actually want me to be king. Because I could kill Sukra, but like, if the overall like people in court don't want me to do that and they see me do that, I could get essentially accused of treason. Like, someone would get accused of treason if they were to conspire against me, right? Like, typically. Yes. And also, if I did kill Sukra, then what? Like, if nobody's on my side, then, you know, I will lose the throne anyway because someone else will jump in. So I would make sure that I have people on my side and, like, slowly gather intel into, like, what people think about it. Or I would have a gigantic army, and then, like, it doesn't matter what people think because I will kill them. So, like, one of the two.
Unfortunately, our massive army was destroyed by the Hephthalites, so it's not there anymore.
So, since the Hephthalites raised me, can I ask for their help? That would be a bad idea, kind of like what Peros did, of like, oh, invite a different empire to reign.
It's also kind of a bad look to try and replace Sukra, the hero who defended you from the Hephthalites, by using the Hephthalites.
True. Also, he, like, fixed everything. Because things were,
stabilized the empire.
So, I don't know, is he a reasonable man? Like, does he have a high opinion of me? Like, I need to know more details.
He has no opinion of you. The opinion of you is, sure, you can wear the crown, but shut up and wait.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't think I really have support, so I need to build that first.
That's exactly what Kavad does.
My god,
He
a smart
needs
boy.
support among other people, and he thinks that, okay, he doesn't like the fact that Sukra is massively disrespecting him.
Yeah.
So he tries to find more support. And who dislikes Sukra? Who would be unhappy with his behavior? Well, the thing is that the one person the nobles hate more than the king is each other.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna be like, well, Sukra is a noble, so I don't think they would be against him, because like he would probably have their interest in mind.
The problem is that Sukra has the interest of his own family at heart,
Right.
not the other nobles.
I see.
And so all the other noble families are seeing that the balance of power they had is being broken, because Sukra is just acting as king. So, well, his family is going to get all the best appointments, all the most money, all the best lands, all the best everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the nobles are very unhappy. Chief among them, the traditional enemy of the Karen family, which is Shapur Miran, who came from the noble family that also supported Peros. So there is some family connection there with our boy Kavad.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Kavad slowly built up his support with the Mihrans and told them that if Sukra continues this way, he's going to make himself king and he's going to overthrow the monarchy. And what happens then, that's going to just entirely rearrange how the government works. All your precious deals, all your precious alliances are going to fall apart. And since they're your traditional family enemies, well, you're going to be the ones on the receiving side of whatever damage they decide to deal out. So we're told that one day, with Kavad's support, Shapur Mihran walked into court, entirely ignoring Sukra, and headed towards Kavad. He then showed him obeisance, and then took a noose, wrapped it around Sukra's neck, and then dragged him out of court bodily.
Oh my god. What?
Yes.
That is so savage. What the
It is pretty harsh.
Like, no metaphors or anything. No. Like an actual noose.
Yep,
What?
just dragged him out.
What?
And, yeah, Sukra was then expelled from court, and Kavad told him that he should leave the capital and go back to his traditional lands. You are dismissed, Sukra. Goodbye.
You abused your power too much.
Yes.
Regarding the nobles, which, like, I'm up for debate. Like, according to the nobles, you did.
But we're told that Sukra, now being expelled from the capital, didn't simply roll over and fold. He decided that, well, now that he's out of the capital, he can just happily just tell everybody what he was thinking. He can tell everybody that if it weren't for him, the empire would have fallen. If it weren't for him, Kavad wouldn't be on the throne. Kavad owes him everything. How dare Kavad do this to him, of all people?
Right.
Him who is so important and so powerful. Also, the problem was that a lot of the nobility still supported Sukra, and they sent taxes to him from across the empire, not Kavad. So, well, Kavad decided that he needed a way to absolutely break Sukra's power, because we can't go on like this. Yes, he was helpful, but he's getting a bit too big for his boots.
Enough is enough.
So he orders Shapur Mihran to gather an army of all the other nobles who hated and envied Sukra, and with all these forces they march upon Sukra's lands and defeat him in battle. So Sukra was then captured alive and brought in chains before Kavad.
Oh, heck.
Where the situation was at last reversed, and Kavad was sitting in power and Sukra was in chains, unable to do anything. Kavad then did the only logical thing and decided to very simply execute Sukra.
Yep.
And ensure that, no, you're no longer getting any power, and no, you can't pretend to be the king.
Yep.
That's how you end up dead.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. This apparently led to a common saying at the time The fire of Sukra has been extinguished and Shapur's wind blows. After Shapur Mihran, who had acted as the agent of the king.
I see.
But alright, now that he's in charge, Kavad has to deal with the mess that the empire is in. There are several issues he needs to face. The first one is kind of an external issue. He wants to make sure all his borders are safe, everything is stable. First of all, he has the fact that they've promised to pay the Hephthalites massive amounts of money that they don't actually have.
Yep.
So, where can you get some money?
From tribute?
Who could give us tribute?
Like taxes?
Not taxes, we're kind of doing as much as we can there, although he has a solution for that later. But he decides that he should send an embassy to the Roman Emperor Leo and say, hey, you remember that tribute you're giving us to defend the Caucasian passes?
Oh.
Could you pay us some more?
We make the Romans pay, I see.
Yes, the Romans are paying the bill for the horrible, horrible defeat we got. And it looks like the Romans are accepting enough that they say, okay, fine, you can have some extra money, and that keeps us afloat with our payments to the Hephthalites, which is good, I guess. Could be worse, could be better.
Could be, yeah.
At the same time, the southern border of the empire was being threatened by Arab raids into Iran and Mesopotamia, but Kavad can't really do much about that at the moment. He needs to solidify the heart of the empire first. Because the nobles were still extremely powerful, and his coup after Sukra meant that everybody was kind of concerned that he was just going to be an enemy to the nobles. And it would be just best to replace him.
Yeah.
And overall, if you look at recent history, like ever since the end of Shapur II, most kings were either dominated by or killed by the nobles.
Yeah.
Kavad doesn't like those odds.
We had that good moment where they were too scared of Shapur, was it?
Yes.
And then the rest has just been,
But that was like 150 years ago now.
Yep.
It's been a while.
Yep.
And in the meantime, you remember all the previous kings, Yazdegerd I, Shapur III, Bahram IV, a bunch of other people were killed or overthrown by the nobles. And the only ones that actually did well enough, Bahram V and Yazdegerd II, were the ones that sort of followed what the nobles were telling them to do.
Yep.
So Kavad realizes that even though he's not being explicitly puppeted by Sukra anymore, he still owes so much to the nobles, and he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
So he decides that we need a solution to the nobles. We need to end nobility once and for all.
Yes.
And how do we do that, Serial?
Is it telling that this new long episode of what I am calling now a golden age starts with getting rid of the nobles? I don't know. Let us know in comments. This is not a YouTube video, but there's comments on
we
Spotify.
Have comments sometimes, yeah.
Maybe it has something to do with one another. I don't know. Correlation doesn't mean causation, but Okay, so how do we get rid of the nobles?
How would you get rid of the nobles? You're at the head of an empire. How do you just stop the nobles?
Oh, God. Why do we need them? What happens if they're gone?
Well, it's sort of like, you saw what Sukra did. The nobles are good for administering regions more granularly. They know their territories. They have their own armies that they train. And the fact that they compete with each other means that they're generally not too damaging. And if a Sukra appears, you can just replace him by using the Mihrans.
So they have their own... They administer places... Okay.
Yes.
Can we administer these places ourselves?
In a way.
Or can we, appoint people?
Well, we'd have to take the lands away from the nobles first.
Yeah. Okay, so do we
lands.
have a military to do that?
Well...
Because I feel like the problem is that the nobles do have their own military.
Yes, that's the problem.
And land to defend.
But who is a military made up of, Serial?
Well, not noble people.
That is correct.
Mostly soldiers who are, everyone else in the empire.
Very good.
Okay, so can we get the people on our side?
Kavad's solution to the nobility is communism.
Hell yeah! I love this, man. Okay, please continue.
Because
I want to know.
in the chaos that had been happening with the end of Perros' reign and everybody panicking about the Hephthalites and everything going downhill and the famine and everything going horrible,
Yeah.
a Zoroastrian preacher named Mazdak had recently started his own religion,
Oh.
where it was taking some Zoroastrian ideals to the extreme, and apparently it was based on an older Manichaean heresy.
No.
It's like so similar to certain Manichaean parts that a lot of the sources call them Manichaeans. And some scholars claim that Mazdak didn't really exist and it was just Kavad saying, oh, no, I didn't come up with the idea, it was someone else.
Sure.
But personally, it looks like there is enough evidence for Mazdak being a guy that it makes sense that this arose.
It was just convenient
as a,
for Kavad, but
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was convenient, so he decided to use this movement that was popping up.
yeah, but the movement, it would have made sense that it appears if people were struggling with certain things.
That's right.
And, you know.
So, theologically, it looks like Mazdak claimed that darkness and light were not both gods, like in Manichaeism, but that darkness wasn't really conscious, and the material world just randomly popped up as a mixture of light and dark. Not by design from the darkness, as Mani had claimed, so the material world isn't just purely evil. However, in both systems, the idea is that the light is trapped inside the darkness. And in Manichaeism, this, you can, free it through asceticism and separating yourself as much as possible from the physical world. So, for example, with celibacy, vegetarianism, and non-violence. But the interesting difference between Manichaeism and Mazdakism is that while Manichaeism advocates for asceticism and abandoning the world, Mazdakism advocates for the satisfaction of your desires as long as you don't harm anyone, and that is the way out of suffering.
I feel like that's very healthy.
But what is the cause of suffering, Serial?
Depends on what religion you ask.
Fair enough. Mazdak believes that the main cause of suffering in humanity was inequality.
That's... yeah?
And
that tracks.
Inequality is only enforced through violence. So he preached a message of brotherly love, social justice, and some sort of emancipation of women, allowing them to marry outside their class.
This is very progressive. I like this.
Yeah. The enemies of Mazdak sort of tried to twist this image, claiming that he advocated for common ownership of women and goods, but this might just be people slandering him. We don't know if that was actually what he said. If he said, no, abolish marriage, everybody's in common. Although this does seem to match a Zoroastrian tradition where wives could be shared if somebody had trouble getting an heir. So that might make sense. And the community of goods is just an extension of Zoroastrian aversion to inequality. So it is possible. We just aren't really sure because it's his enemies generally telling us the story.
Right.
And of course, to remove inequality, Mazdak advocated for the redistribution of the riches of the nobles to the poor, because the nobles had just stolen their riches from the poor anyway.
Yep. That's how it works.
So, time to eat the rich.
Like, in any society at any time, this is how that happens. You cannot get incredibly rich without taking advantage of other people. There is no moral way to be in the 1%. I will stand behind this statement.
So, yeah, we decide that it's time to absolutely destroy the nobles and redistribute their land to the common people and start a new age. According to the Shahnameh, Mazdak was given an audience by Kavad and asked him, what should happen to a man who keeps an antidote from a man who was bitten by a poisonous snake? Kavad said that such a man should be hanged.
Damn.
He then asks what you should do to a man who refuses food to a starving man. And Kavad said that the selfish man is basically a murderer. And this is why he opened up the state granaries to the people and allowed everybody to freely take from them.
That's intense, but fair. We're taking what, was it Peros? Who was like, you will be kind to one another, or else?
Yeah, that was Peros.
We're taking this way of thinking and just applying it to everything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which, harsh, but I'm not against. It's all in the fine print. Like, it depends on how laws are enforced, and I am always of the opinion that it takes a lot of work to be a good lawyer because laws cannot be enforced by machines because humanity and society is way too complex to put a law that always works in one way, and it always depends on the circumstances and the variables of every particular case. So you can't just write something and be like, this is always true, and then you run into problems immediately because each situation is different.
There are edge cases all around that need to be taken care of.
So in
manually.
theory, I think this is a good idea. It will really depend on how it is enforced.
Well, we'll see. We're also told that Mazdak believed that nobles are pointless parasites on society, and they should just be entirely destroyed.
I mean, this can also be applied to the ruler, though, but like we're gonna,
you've seen the problem. But for now, Mazdak claims that, well, it makes sense that the king should be in charge, as divinity created the world. There must be somebody who is in charge of organizing things and directing what people should do. But the nobles, what's the point of the nobles? They're just intermediaries, just taking money that hardworking people have made for them. So let's just get rid of them all.
It is a step in the right direction.
So Kavad, fully convinced of this, so he invites Mazdak to court as his advisor and converts to this new religion, preparing to really break down noble power. So Kavad began by greatly increasing the taxes on the nobility with the aim of giving it all to the struggling poor. Not only that, but all the feudal land that the nobles owned was divided among the peasants who actually worked the land, and the royal granaries were opened up for access by the people. But okay, the problem is, how do you think the nobles will react to all this?
Oh, I'm sure they're gonna be like, you know what, you're right, and they're just gonna calmly join the populace and not put up any resistance.
Absolutely, right? Yes. The nobles see this. They see Kavad, who was meant to be a puppet, entirely upending society. And they decide, maybe that's not great.
Whoopsie.
So one day, soldiers arrive at Kavad's court. They're not his soldiers. He doesn't recognize them. Several noble leaders come up to him and declare him deposed.
Sure.
Kavad is taken out of the palace in chains and locked into what is called the Fortress of Oblivion.
Oh my god, what?
Yes. Pretty hardcore. Yes. And apparently it has this name because the names of those imprisoned there could no longer be spoken on pain of death. So he is entirely thrown away into the deepest, darkest, forgotten hole in the empire. In his place, the nobles established his younger brother, Jamas, who would be more pliable and not entirely reset society. So, yes, that is the end of the reign of Kavad.
Wait, is it?
That is the end of the first reign of Kavad.
Ah, okay. I'm like, this, he clearly gets out of there, right? Count of Monte Cristo style.
Well, sort of. Because he managed to escape one day. That was with the help of his beautiful wife and or sister.
Oh.
Unclear based on the sources. Because apparently the jailer had fallen in love with her and had allowed her to visit Kavad in exchange for sleeping with her.
I see.
So she did that, and taking advantage of the situation, she managed to hide Kavad in a carpet.
Oh, damn.
And when the jailer had asked, why are you carrying out a carpet from this jail? What gives?
Yeah, that seems suspicious.
Yes. The wife said that it was the bedding she had used to sleep when visiting her husband, and also she was menstruating, so it was probably unclean, so she was just going to take care of this, no need to...
Ah, yes, the good old trick of talking to men about women troubles so they will be uncomfortable and not ask more questions.
Like this massive carpet that could contain a human, it's just period stuff.
Yeah.
Don't question it.
And the guy would be like, okay, I will.
Like, okay, no, I go, bye. So, yeah, the wife managed to quickly smuggle Kavad out of jail in this carpet. An alternative version has it that the wife visited Kavad, but they switched clothes, and Kavad escaped in disguise. And apparently it took the guards several days to figure it out, but we don't know what happens to the wife in this story. So then Kavad found a bunch of supporters. He left the fortress and he found the help of a Mazdakite noble named Siavash, which I find it interesting that there were actually some nobles that did become Mazdakites. They thought, this guy actually has a point. We should probably follow this.
Maybe there is hope after all.
Yeah. And Kavad rode east with the help of some loyal supporters, among which, interestingly enough, is Tsar Mer, the son of Sukra, which you wouldn't expect. But probably this was in opposition to the Mihran family, who was now backing the new king, Jamasp. And with all these supporters, Kavad managed to run all the way. Where could he run all the way to? Where would he find support?
I genuinely don't know.
He decides to go to the Hephthalites.
Because, well, you said before that wouldn't be a great idea, but, like, I guess we're doing that now.
I guess, if the alternative is the Fortress of Oblivion, I suppose. Yeah, this will do, I guess. So he ran all the way to the Hephthalites, and there he decided to marry the daughter of the Hephthalite king, who incidentally was also his niece, but, stuff happens. And in exchange, as a dowry, he was given an army of 20,000 horsemen. So that's pretty good.
Damn. Yeah.
We don't really have reports of any battles, but Kavad triumphantly marched west with his Hephthalite army, capturing Ctesiphon and his brother shortly after. Presumably because the nobles realized, well, what's the point in defending a puppet? We might as well just beg forgiveness from Kavad. Back at the court, Jamasp, the brother, was spared, although he was probably blinded to avoid him from ever taking the throne.
Yep.
And his chief noble supporter, who was also one of the people who had voted to execute Kavad instead of just imprisoning him, which probably would have been a better idea for him. This chief noble supporter was also executed.
Yeah.
It looks likely that Kavad didn't go on a great purge of nobles because they had kind of just let him back on the throne without fighting that much, so it was best to sort of avoid a civil war. Also, he executed or imprisoned some key members of the Zoroastrian priesthood, which had moved to replace Kavad to stop Mazdakism from spreading, so we're trying to get rid of all the opposition that we have in the empire.
Right.
But now that he's back on the throne, Kavad decides that being a Mazdakite is cool and all, but maybe we should tone things down. I think, complete equality might make people kill me. Let's just
because, if the nobles are an issue, then the king should also be an issue, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because the problem is that the Mazdakites look to Mazdak, and they look at the king, and they say, why do we need two leaders? We have Mazdak already. Why do we need the king to be in charge? And so there is an extreme branch which decides just, no gods, no masters.
Yeah.
Kill everyone, redistribute their lands. So Kavad tries to turn back a little bit from that. He has some Mazdakite nobles among his court. So that's good. Let's try and redistribute things more. But let's just try and chill out a bit. Also, we're not really sure how much Kavad himself and the Mazdakite nobles actually believed in the message.
Yeah.
And how much they wanted to use it as a tool to beat their enemies with.
Of course.
Always effective to say, oh, let's redistribute your lands, not mine, and then everything will be better.
Of course, yeah.
But the problem is that the Mazdakite genie has been let out of the bottle already, so there are several peasant rebellions that besieged and ransacked noble estates to share their wealth. This led to their loss of favor in court because, if you're just going to ransack things, the king isn't going to be friendly to you, but this is going to be an important element throughout the rest of Kavad's reign. But there is a problem now that Kavad's back on the throne. Kavad needs money. Kavad needs so much money because he has to pay the Hephthalites the money they don't have, And he also needs to pay them now for the extra army that he used to retake his throne.
Right.
So what now? Well, Kavad decided that the best place to get some money would be Rome.
Again.
Right? They've given us money before.
Yeah.
And all the previous time we've asked for money, they've given it to us. So why not? Let's just get some more money from them. So in 502, Kavad asked Emperor Anastasius for money, but this time the Romans refused.
They're like, no, we've given you too much already.
Yeah. But, well, what did Bahram V and Yazdegerd II do when refused by the Romans? They just started a small war, conquered a couple of border cities, and the Romans said, okay, you can go.
Yeah.
And gave them some money.
We're like, we can still beat you up like a bully.
Yeah. So Kavad decides, you know what, let's just go and take a few cities, it'll be easy. And then we can go home with more money, and it'll be fine.
Will it be easy?
Well, apparently not.
Ah.
Because this time the Romans seem very convinced not to pay. And Kavad says, well, I started the war anyway, I might as well continue.
Yep.
So Kavad took an army with a large contingent of Hephthalites and captured the border city of Theodosiopolis, and then later besieged the city of Amida while marching into Roman Armenia. The fact that this war was escalating must have been pretty surprising to everyone involved, because the last minor war under Yazdegerd II had been 60 years earlier.
Right.
And the last large war, the last serious war, was all the way back at the time of Shapur II, 140 years before. So few people remembered a war in this area, and none of them remembered something on this scale.
Yeah.
So restarting the eternal cycle of fighting Romans and then getting revenge and then fighting them for revenge.
Which is not a good cycle to restart, let me tell you.
No.
We could do without that.
It will end in the destruction of everything.
Yep.
But we'll get there when we get there.
Okay.
In surprisingly few episodes. Because, hey, there's only 92 episodes in this season. Stuff is going to happen. There's also apparently a Christian prophecy that the Romans were being punished for their sins and Kavad was the agent of God. But fighting it is. Anastasius also sent an ambassador once Kavad actually didn't stop at like one tiny city.
Yeah.
And Anastasius said, okay, we'll give you the money. But Kavad thought, well, if it's going to be this easy, I might as well push all the advantages I can get.
No. The greed.
Yes. Greed and lust for power.
This will be our downfall.
And yeah, we also get an omen, Serial, which is always fun, because some Hephthalites apparently came upon a reclusive monk called Jacob. And they drew their bows to kill him, but they found themselves paralyzed and unable to shoot their arrows. Hearing this, Kavad went to the man and was impressed by his holiness, offering him whatever he would ask for. Jacob then ended up asking that those who escaped from Kavad's advance could be safe under his care. Kavad interpreted this as the fact that there would be more great advances by him, so he decided to free Jacob, give him this boon, and then head off, marching even further to conquer.
I see.
And so Kavad went over to the siege of Amida, this important city around the Roman area of Armenia. And we're told that during the siege, you get bored, you might as well taunt the attackers. So the defenders decided to taunt Kavad. And one way they did it was with the sex workers of the city showing their private parts over the walls.
Oh no!
Or to quote Procopius, those parts of a woman's body that it is not proper for a man to see uncovered.
Right. This is so funny. I feel like I've heard about this before.
But Serial, this is a good omen. Do you know why?
Because I was gonna say something really terrible. It's fine.
It's probably that bad. Don't worry.
Why is it a good omen?
Well, because this clearly means that the city's secrets will soon be revealed to us.
I mean, if you want to interpret it that way.
Yes.
I guess.
We'll soon be able to enter through the back door, that sort of thing.
It's also very funny to me that they're like, ah, yes, we need to demoralize this enemy and make them turn away. Just show them your parts. That will tell them. Like, who proposed this?
I don't know.
Whose idea
Sieges are
was
boring.
this?
You're
Oh,
like,
God.
yeah, do you want to flash the Persians? Yeah, come on, let's
Yeah.
go.
That's so ridiculous.
Yes.
Like, in what world was this a good idea?
Can harm. But, well, the city's secrets would soon be revealed to Kavad because his men then found an unguarded sewer and snuck into the city.
I've definitely heard about this.
They killed a bunch of monks who were guarding the area but had gotten drunk that night. And then they finally managed to capture the city, which was eventually looted for 3 days. We're also told that apparently Kavad was leading the battle personally, that he was climbing the siege ladders himself and threatened any one of his men who tried to retreat, saying, hey, I'm here in the
Don't
front
you dare.
lines. You should march there as well. The sack of Amida supplied more than enough money to sate the Hephthalites for a while, so cool, our angry loan sharks are being taken care of for a bit. That's good. And as was tradition, but we've abandoned it for a while, many survivors of the city were deported all the way to Mesopotamia to ensure that the fields would be better cultivated and,
Right, yeah, we
our empire would prosper.
we make people move.
Yes.
That's true.
And the fall of Amida in 503 was the most significant success against the Romans since Shapur II's day. So Kavad is getting pretty puffed up and full of himself.
Yeah.
Kavad also tried to take the city of Edessa with the help of his Lakhmid Arab allies, but their king died, and so this interrupted their plans. And incidentally, the Arab raids from before had been stopped by Kavad with the help of these Lakhmid Arabs. So that's solidifying our borders.
Okay.
But then Kavad was unable to really press his advantage against the Romans because he had to face an invasion in the east by so-called hostile Huns, where we don't know who it is. We have a few options. It could be that it was the Hephthalites, worried that the empire was getting back on its feet and wanted to attack while most of the army was fighting the Romans. But it could also just be some nomads attacking through the Caucasus, because there were some kind of Huns in that area, but we're not sure.
Right.
However, it looks like the fact that we get Sassanid coins in regions that were formerly occupied by the Hephthalites after Peroz's death means that there was probably some war in the east, and it turned in Kavad's favor. Kavad managed to retake some of the lands that were lost by his father. Although we don't know if he made a peace with the Hephthalites and had to continue paying them tribute, or if he could just keep the money for himself. We're not sure. But well, since Kavad's in the east, the Romans decide to counterattack and besiege the city of Amida once again. We receive a report of the Romans being sneaky here because during a truce for negotiations, the Romans made sure that one of their generals was absent from swearing to uphold the truce.
And then they can, again, with loopholes, be like, oh, but we never promised to do that.
So when an agreed-upon convoy of supplies tried to get into Amida, the absent Roman general gave the order to destroy it and said, but I never swore to do anything, so it's fine that I ordered to attack you.
I wasn't there that day.
But in any case, the siege was fierce and hard fought because the Romans continued digging tunnels under the city to try and get in, and the Sassanids kept flooding them, but the fortress held secure, and they were able to hold on as long as possible. The Romans then also built a fortified settlement called Dara, opposite of the Sassanid city of Nisibis, which had been taken by Shapur II and had long been a very powerful border fortress. So this is for the Romans to build a new line of defense in case of any future wars, so that essentially we are going back to the time of Shapur II where we have lines of forts facing each other, where we can actually fight. You know, the reason we're having many advances now is because we went through Armenia, which at the time of Shapur II was its own separate country, but now that it's the actual border between the empires, it's easier for us to go through, but we're trying to go back. But overall, the fact that there was this fighting caused a peace treaty in the end, where Rome agreed to 7 years of peace, where they would pay Kavad a pile of cash yearly, officially as compensation for building the fortress of Dara and to defend the Caucasus,
We like
as
this.
usual. But, probably to pay the Hephthalites if that deal was still on, or just in general as a bonus, which is nice. And in exchange for all this cash, the Romans would get the city of Amida back without actually having to take it in battle. Okay. Although little did they know, the city that they were besieging had only a week's supplies left.
Oh.
And if they'd waited a week more, they would have captured it, but thankfully the survivors made it. Yeah, so good for them. Interestingly enough, this war shows us that the Sassanids were developing two different armies based on their needs. They needed a mostly cavalry army that could go toe-to-toe with the Hephthalites, while in the west, it was most important to have good siege capabilities since it was strongly urbanized, and there were a lot of heavily fortified border settlements.
This is always the thing, isn't it? Like, you specialize in one of the two, and then whoever's using the other one just destroys you.
Yeah. Also, it looks like Kavad was getting a lot of technological advancements in cavalry based on his time among the Hephthalites, because a few decades ago, the stirrups were invented in China.
Oh.
They were brought to Iran via the Hephthalites.
I can't believe we didn't have stirrups.
Has them. No, we were just holding on for dear life.
Yeah, that feels like a pretty logical invention. Yeah. How did people not come up with this?
It took them a long time.
Yeah, I imagine there are difficulties, I'm sure. Because otherwise it's just... Wouldn't you want to be able to hold on better to your horse?
Yeah. I saw that there used to be stirrups where you would just hold on by your big toe, but apparently getting your whole foot there apparently was a difficult idea. But the good thing about having stirrups is that when you do a cavalry charge, you can put a lot more force into your blow, as opposed to just holding on to the horse without getting thrown off.
Yeah.
Well, now we have peace. The nobility is sort of dealt with. They've been made to understand their place. So, what is Kavad doing? Well, first of all, let's see what he's doing with aspects of religion. How did he treat minority religions in the empire? Well, in Caucasian Iberia, he presented himself as the champion of Orthodox Zoroastrianism against the local Christianity. But at the same time, he also accepted the Zoroastrian withdrawal from Armenia that Balazs had initiated. Instead, in the rest of the empire, it looks like he continued to use his predecessor's policy of using the Church of the East as a political tool and letting Christians be as long as they were the correct type of Christian.
Yeah.
So overall, it looks like he was reasonably tolerant, and several Christians managed to gain high office and rise in the court.
Okay, not as bad as it's been before, so that's a win.
It even looks likely that he supported the marriage of the clergy, since this was contrary to Mazdakism, which sort of follows an anti-Mazdakite line where some confiscated Mazdakite temples of people who were too rebellious and too aggressive were then handed over to the Christians.
I see.
So they're more malleable than the extreme equalizers. But Kavad isn't done with reforms. He decides that if the empire needs to hold on against foreign and domestic enemies, it needs to be rebuilt.
Yep. Okay.
And this is work that will take generations.
Yep.
And will eventually be used as the core of the administration of the Islamic empires that will come later.
Oh, so we are successful in, remaking?
Yes, in a way.
Okay.
From a certain point of view, yes. We'll find out it has issues, but, well, we're starting with it.
Yeah, something is done. Because this is not an easy task, so I assumed we would try and then everything would just collapse. Because it wouldn't, since it will take generations, the moment this one particular king dies, maybe the next ones won't continue the reform.
Well, you need to be lucky to have multiple generations of skilled, intelligent rulers.
Yep.
Hopefully that happens. Well, the thing is that Kavad looked at his enemies. He looked at the Romans, and he saw that under Anastasius, they were able to produce much more revenue, and it came directly to the ruler, which meant that he didn't have to deal with nobles.
Yep.
Right? It wasn't that the nobles collect taxes and then they give a percentage to the king. The taxes just go to the king.
Yep.
And that's it.
Cut out the middleman.
This would make it a lot easier to avoid a similar situation to Sukhra at the beginning of his reign, where he was just accumulating money and refusing to give it back to Kavad.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, Kavad seems to follow a sort of Romanization of the empire, which can even be seen in his sponsoring of Roman-style baths like his father.
Right, yeah. Which people did not like, because they were like, oh, this is too Roman. We don't like it.
But Kavad is saying, if it's a good
Shut
idea,
up.
we might as well use it.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's saying, shut
Let's
up,
go
it
for
feels nice to be in a bath.
Yes. And they're heated? What do you mean? That's amazing. Heated baths in the 6th century.
For everyone
this is
to
wild.
use. Come on.
Yes, it's great.
I don't know if literally everyone or everyone with an asterisk, but you know.
I mean, if it's Roman style, then it should be everyone who can pay like a basic amount, a small fee, so should be there. Because, yeah, Kavad thinks that the Romans have some ideas right. You know, they have a centralized bureaucratic state without a strong nobility, and
Take
Kavad
what
thinks
works.
would be cool if we had that too.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, he heavily reformed the administration. He gave orders to make a vast survey of all the empire and what everyone owned to ensure that he would know what taxes everybody needed to pay.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So let's not dedicate to the fact that, oh, every once in a while we get an update and then we see maybe and you're using decades old information. No. He's going to just make it so we know everything all the time and we know how many taxes you owe.
He's making a Finanzamt.
Yes.
Like the, you know, what's it called in English? The IRA? Whoever
No, the
calculates your
IRS.
tax.
The IRA
IRS.
is a different thing.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, the IRS, the people who know how much you have to pay and then get angry at you if you don't pay it, but they won't tell you. So you have to calculate it yourself. Because, I guess.
Yes. Kavad being reasonable just tells you how much you have to pay, and that's fine.
Great. That's already better than
like
our
in
current
most countries
system.
in the world where they're just, this is how much you must pay. Okay, cool. Love it. So Kavad decides that he's going to know how much tax everybody owes.
Mm-hmm.
And also, he's going to have the tax be paid in money, no longer in kind.
Okay.
So if you have crops, you're not going to pay a percentage of your crop. You're going to pay the equivalent monetary value of it. Also, the taxes are no longer based on a percentage of how much you have in crops that year, but it's going to be a fixed amount based on the amount of land you own. So this has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that you know how much money you're going to make every year because the amount of land in the empire is the same.
Right.
Right. You know that if you have a long-term project that takes 10 years, you know how much money you'll have in these 10 years to build it. The disadvantage is that it's sort of trusting the peasants to do their own administration.
Yep.
Because during good years, they won't be taxed as much in proportion, so they have to save up. Because during bad years, they'll have to be paying still the same amount, so they'll be doing poorly off.
Worrying me. Like, what happens if, like, your state or, like, your worth is measured in crops, but of course, you can have a bad harvest, and then, you know.
Yeah, well, Kavad's idea is that, well, you should have prepared for it during the good years.
It'll even out.
Yeah. So he's basically transferring it from the state to the people. Because beforehand, the state had to be like, oh, let's find out next year if it's going to be a good year, if we get a lot of money or not. While now the state knows how much money you're going to have. And it's just the people who have to question, hope there's a good harvest. Because otherwise, well, they're going to have to pay out of pocket.
That's way
for
more
their
stressful.
things.
But...
Yeah. He also added in a tax not only per person, but based on how much land you owned, so that tended to get more money out of the nobles, which is always good to have.
Hell yeah. Tax the rich.
Yeah. And incidentally, this is also closer to the system that the Romans had used, so Kavad had probably learned something about that during the war, and saw, yeah, let's go for this.
Understood.
On the military side, he established a full-ass royal army, which was not fully dependent on the nobles, but dependent on an elite group of professional soldiers that served the king directly. So he has a group of elite cavalry directly under his own command, which were mainly taken from members of the minor nobility. So not the big noble families, but smaller groups, second sons, all that sort of thing, who would owe their loyalty to him.
And not to their families.
Yes. He also split military command geographically. So beforehand, there was a powerful title of General of the Empire, who was just in charge of all the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And now he decides to have 4 separate armies. There's going to be north, east, west, and south, so that he can stop a single noble from becoming the head of all the armies, and it allows for greater flexibility when he's fighting the different enemies of the empire, whether they're the Hephthalites, the Romans, the Caucasians, or the Arabs. So he's making sure that each army is specialized, and they're under the control of a local noble who can react quickly so that everything is better under control. It's also likely that all the upheaval resulting from the Mazdakite uprising is what allowed Kavad this many reforms without being overthrown by the nobles. Because the nobles were too busy trying to resist their peasants rebelling and trying to take their lands, that when Kavad said, you have to pay a few more taxes, they were like, yeah, sure, whatever, just help us. So that works out for him. Nice. Another point connecting Kavad to other reformers is that he founded many cities, most of them being in Persia proper, and some in Media as well. And like his predecessors, he constructed canals and bridges across the empire to improve the food supply and general infrastructure and ensure that everything was being run properly. So at last, with this newly reformed empire, Kavad managed to push back the Hephthalites. He started a new war in the east and decided he was going to avenge his father's death. So he attacked the Hephthalites, he won several battles with them, and recaptured the city of Merv, which was an important city on the Silk Road trade routes. And he took all the lands that they had conquered since the days of Peroz's death. So they're all back.
So we actually got the revenge?
Yes, we got revenge. It's back. We have no details about it.
I'm like, we should let it go, but, I guess.
Yeah, no, we got it. It's done. We avenged our father's death. We avenged being captured as a child. Awesome.
Incredible.
Now, this doesn't mean that the Hephthalites were entirely defeated. They're still around. They're still in the steppe, but out of Iran.
Interesting to say, we have defeated them after, they've helped us so many times.
I mean, they fought us several times. It's, it's a complicated relationship.
We also married,
Yes, we married a princess of them. But yeah, apparently this war with the Hephthalites ended in a peace treaty where Kavad got to keep the newly conquered lands, but probably still had to pay the Hephthalites a certain sum just to have them not attack. So it looks like a lot of the money that the Romans are paying us is being transferred to the Hephthalites and saying, okay, we're cool. The balance is neutral. Everything is fine, I guess. But, well, as any wise king, around 520... Kavad was getting, into his 50s. He was starting to think about the succession. And he had 3 main sons that he had to choose between. He had the eldest son, where the problem is that he was a really devout Mazdakite, so he might want to redistribute things a bit too hard, and Kavad thought, I tried that once and it was overthrown.
Yeah.
That sounds like a bad direction for the empire. Then the second son had lost an eye in battle, and so wasn't really whole of body, so not eligible for the throne.
That is so mean, because, that just means he's a badass, I guess, in military.
Yeah, just because he fought well for his family, but apparently not. But the third son was a man called Khosrow, who was identified as generally being a brilliant and ambitious young man.
Okay.
Kavad thinks, yep, you're going to be my heir. That's great. He decided to safeguard Khosrow's succession rather than his brother's by following a past example of Yazdegerd I. Do you remember who Yazdegerd I had adopted back a while ago?
No. I don't remember these things.
Well, Yazdegerd had adopted the Roman Emperor Theodosius II to secure the Roman succession.
Yep.
So Kavad thinks that, well, it might be time for the Romans to return the favor. So he sends a letter to the Roman Emperor Justin I and says, hey, adopt my adult son. It's just a symbolic thing, but it'll make it so that he is guaranteed to be the heir, and everybody agrees and knows it.
It's so wild that we constantly have relationships with the Romans that are like, now we're friends, now we're mortal enemies, now we're friends again. Like, I don't know. This is the story of like the hero and the supervillain who can't live without each other.
Yes. It's going to be interesting. And War with Rome is going to be... We're going to have more and more disagreements with Rome as time goes on.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And we'll find out why. Because the Roman Emperor Justin was originally in favor of this plan. He thought, yeah, sounds good. It'll be friendly, it'll be good. But there was a scheming advisor who whispered into Justin's ear, who said, well, wait, but if you adopt Khosrow, does that mean that when you die, he could have a claim on the empire?
Oh no.
And he could take over both empires?
But this is not how that works, right?
Well, not normally, but to be fair to the scheming advisor, if Khosrow wanted, he could claim that.
Right.
You know, it's always a possibility. You would say, I'm the emperor's son, I'm the legitimate heir.
Right.
Off we go. So that's complicated. So the Romans decided, you know what, let's fix this. Let's do something else. So when Khosrow traveled all the way to Nisibis at the border of the empire for this adoption ceremony, he found a Roman ambassador telling him, oh yeah, we'll adopt you, don't worry. As a barbarian, of course. Not like as a real son. Just like we'd adopt all those Germanic barbarians in the West. You can do the same thing. How does that sound?
Not satisfactory.
Yeah. Kavad was not impressed and decided that he would remember this.
Yep.
The Romans would pay for their arrogance and their insult.
Yep.
And the adoption didn't go through, and poor Khosrow was humiliated and went home with nothing.
Yeah, that like hurts my soul.
Yeah, it's harsh. Incidentally, this plan had been suggested by one of the rescuers of Kavad, a man called Siavash, who was later executed for his pro-Mazdakite leanings, and supposedly because he caused these negotiations to fail.
Did he?
We don't know, but the fact is that Siavash was the head of the army, and Kavad kind of needed to split the army into 4 for his reforms to work, so getting rid of him isn't going to hurt. And this is also when the Mazdakite power reaches its peak, because they seem to have plotted to make Kavad's eldest Mazdakite son as heir instead of Khosrow.
Right, yeah. That would make sense.
Yeah, this was at the same time as a large-scale peasant revolt that was protesting against the new tax reforms, because, again, on a bad year, you still have to pay taxes, but you have barely anything left for yourself. And this would eventually result in Kavad cracking down really hard on Mazdak. We're not sure if it's Kavad himself or Khosrow, but Khosrow is the agent of this.
I see.
Because he apparently invited all the chief Mazdakite theologians to a debate,
Yeah.
and they were all defeated verbally by the Zoroastrian and Christian clergy present before them.
Oof, okay.
Then, having lost their debates, they were seized and killed by the soldiers.
Fun.
The main Mazdakite leadership, including Mazdak himself, were then killed and the cult was outlawed.
Right. So that's that.
Because it was a tool that had outlived its usefulness. Instead, in external policy, it looks like the Abyssinians, who were Christians and Roman allies living in modern Ethiopia, or thereabouts, had taken over Yemen in 525, leading to a potential threat of a 2-pronged assault against the empire that Kavad would have to deal with. But, well, Kavad was now faced with 2 insults. He was faced with the insult to Khosrow, his heir, and the fact that now the Romans were asking the Abyssinians to attack through Arabia. That's not on. What do you mean? So, in 528, when the new Roman emperor, a man you may have heard of called Justinian I, also known as Justinian the Great, took the throne.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yes. Kavad had begun trying to push back Mazdakism by enforcing Zoroastrian worship in Iberia, and this resulted in a Christian rebellion. He then followed up the crushing of this rebellion by invading the Roman vassal kingdom of Lazica in the western Caucasus. while the Romans decided to take their forces into Mesopotamia. At the same time, there were Arab allies fighting each other, with the Lakhmids raiding around Antioch for the Sassanids, and the Ghassanids defending the Romans. So everybody has their own pet Arab tribe that they're sending against each other.
Right, of course. Just normal things.
So the Romans decided to attack Mesopotamia and try to capture the city of Nisibis. They were led by someone else you may have heard of, a general called Belisarius.
Yes. Belisarius is so cool.
Yes. And they were defeated in their siege of Nisibis, but on their counterattack by Kavad, the two sides met in battle in one of the greatest open field battles between the two empires outside the Roman fortified city of Dara. The Persians outnumbered the Romans 2-1, and the Romans under Belisarius tried to negotiate for a truce. We're told that the Sassanid commander replied that he would be happy to negotiate, but he wasn't sure that he could trust the Romans because, for them, and I quote, "The making of promises is easy, but the fulfillment of promises indeed is a most difficult thing and beyond hope."
Fair. You know, some shade there, but like...
A little bit. The general also told the Romans that they should prepare a bath and lunch for him in the city because he'd be there the next day.
Whoa.
But the battle began, and through the impressive skill of the general Belisarius, the Romans won a great victory and defeated Kavad's forces.
There's a reason why Belisarius is so cool.
He's pretty cool.
Other than being a dinosaur.
Yes, Belisaurus the dinosaur with a big belly.
Mm.
But yeah, the defeat was quite significant, but it did not stop the fighting because the Sassanid army did survive and was still powerful and flexible enough thanks to Kavad's reforms that they could regroup in Nisibis and call support from the rest of the empire.
Mm-hmm.
The next year, Kavad came with a new army and inflicted a serious defeat on the Romans at a place called Callinicum in Syria. And this time, Belisarius was defeated.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, this battle was won in part because the Romans had been fasting for Easter before the battle, and so when they were fighting, they were debilitated and weak.
Yeah. Not compatible.
Yeah, no. This defeat was apparently so bad for the Romans that Belisarius was removed from his command and recalled to Constantinople, where he would eventually go to have other adventures in the west, but we'll stop seeing him for now. It also has to be said that the Sassanid army suffered heavy losses at the Battle of Callinicum, and even their general was recalled for punishment at Ctesiphon, despite having officially won, because he had lost so many men.
Winning, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Apparently at a high cost.
Kavad then later attacked the city of Martyropolis, that you might remember was built during the reign of Yazdegerd I as a symbol of peace.
Right.
And he did this to strengthen his bargaining position in the final peace treaty, but it was at this time that he became sick and died at last.
Okay.
However, he made sure to very clearly write a will where his son Khosrow would succeed him.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me, Khosrow. You know him, yes?
Yep.
Nobody else, just him, okay? We're good? Great. Okay, I'm gonna die now.
Oh boy. Is this gonna work? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we're stuck with a little bit of war with the Romans, but it would end shortly afterwards under his heir Khosrow. But we'll see that in the next episode.
Okay.
So there we go. That is the end of Kavad I's reign. What do you think about him, Serial? How'd you like that?
So many things happened.
Yes, very many.
We have 2 parts of his life, and then 2 strategies for the Empire.
Yeah.
I think it went well overall, which impressive.
Things are definitely better off than before.
Yeah, very excited about getting rid of the nobles. Amazing.
Yes.
Wonderful choice. Sad that it's a king making that choice, because obviously the next step is getting rid of the monarchy, but that's not going to happen. So...
No, not really.
That's why what happened, but you know.
Yes. All right, well then, are you ready to rate him?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go. Our first category is final moments. How interesting was his death? He died of disease. That's it.
We don't
after
know
securing
much,
a succession. Right? No, it's just dying of disease.
Oh.
Fine. I'd honestly go for a 1 just because it's not just disappearing into nothingness. But
yeah. Same.
It's not terribly impressive. So, yeah. So with a 1 and a 1, we get a 1 out of 10 for final moments. Our next category is battle hardness. How good was he at war and fighting? Well, we have several things to draw from here. Well, first of all, he had this war with the Romans, this first war with the Romans under Anastasius. He managed to conquer several cities. He conquered the city of Amida himself. He was leading the men charging up the ladder and encouraging them to not retreat. So that's pretty good. He then had a first war with the Hephthalites. That went pretty well. He managed to conquer some new bits of territory. He then went back to the war with the Romans, and that was victorious, although not a complete wipeout. He then was at peace for a while, but then decided to go on a large campaign against the Hephthalites, where he basically retook everything his father had lost. So,
Cool.
We have gotten our revenge against the Hephthalites. That's nice. Again, it's not destroying the Hephthalites or anything, but it's going well enough. Things are pretty good.
Sure.
Then, together with his Lakhmid Arab allies, he managed to stop the raids into the empire. That's good. That's helpful. And then we have the last war with Rome, where he manages to win some battles in Armenia, conquer a few settlements. He loses a battle against Belisarius, but then he wins another one hard enough that Belisarius is recalled.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good track record.
It's going reasonably well. I think it's broadly good. It's not, unbeatable line of victories, and it's not anything. He isn't ever. I mean, he is defeated sometimes, but again, he doesn't lose anything for the Empire because of that.
Pretty good.
So, what do you think that's worth? How much do you think that should go for?
Okay, I think we need to do this the opposite way, like not giving him points, but subtracting points, because it is pretty
fair.
good overall.
Yeah, I'd say so. Subtracting points, he did lose a couple of battles against the Romans.
Yeah.
That happened. There we go. That was in the second war with the Romans. In the first one, he doesn't win a total victory.
Yeah.
He sort of wins a lot of victories, but none of them are total victories.
I see.
They always end up with him making some concessions and saying, okay, we'll find a middle ground. This will be good. So he is pretty good, but not exceptional, I would say.
Yeah, not like, we, changed the entire empire, we conquered.
No, it's just like, avenging the Hephthalite defeat, that's great, that's important. Winning some battles against the Romans, but it's not massive changes in territory, massive reforms. So that's pretty interesting. I'd say I'm like a 6 or a 7, where it's pretty good, but nothing exceptional.
That's where I was as well.
Oh, let me see. 6 or 7. We gave a 6 to Bahram the 5th, Bahram Gur, and we haven't given a 7 in a long while. Who do we give a 7 to? Have we ever given a 7?
Good question.
Yeah, weirdly enough, we haven't given anyone a 7.
Well, I guess this is the time then.
Sounds like a good opportunity for it. Yeah. It's a bunch of good victories. He retakes a lot of stuff. I'd say a 7 is a good score for him.
Like, overall, really good militarily. Not like, the end all be all, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with a 7 and a 7, he gets a 14 out of 20 for battle hardness. Our next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulations? Kinda.
Yeah, I mean...
He financed the cult of Mazdak to try and take down the nobles.
And it worked.
That is the big one. That worked a lot. That caused enough chaos among the nobles that he managed to do a bunch of reforms. That was important. That was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And then he also kind of managed to scheme his way into having the Mazdakites not take over. It's like he managed to use them as a tool, but then discard them when they got too uppity for themselves. So there's a lot there. He managed to escape from the Fortress of Oblivion.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, that was fun. His wife, but
he was involved. He
was involved in being rescued, yeah.
Yeah, he was there. And he managed to go to the Hephthalites, make a marriage pact with them to retake his throne. Mm-hmm. That was pretty cool.
He plays the factions really well.
He does that. Also, at the beginning I didn't mention it, but he manages to just outmaneuver Sukra, who is this experienced, noble, and powerful man, into being eventually overthrown and executed.
Right.
So that's pretty cool.
True. His very start into being legitimate and being like listened to. That's true.
Yeah. Then, as other schemes, what does he do later in life? I don't know if you want to give him any points for the fact that he tried to have Khosrow adopted by the Romans and make that work out. It didn't work in the end, but could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good plan. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
But I guess it didn't work, even though it worked before. So, like, you know.
Yeah, the Romans just decided to be pissy about it.
Yeah. Goddamn.
So, yeah, I think most of his scheminess has to do with using the Mazdakites as a tool, defeating Sukra in a battle of wits, and then eventually managing to stabilize the empire and regain the legitimacy. Like, he was good enough at political operations that, despite having tried to entirely destroy the nobility in his first reign, in the second reign he sort of pulls it back a little bit and manages to be effective rather than just purely ideological.
Yeah.
So how much do you think that's worth? I'm definitely in the upper half of it.
Yeah, I think I'll go for a 7, maybe.
I was also thinking a 7 or an 8. I'm wondering if... I honestly think employing the Mazdakites was such a ballsy move that it deserves an 8.
I will stay at a 7.
That's fair. So with an 8 and a 7, he gets a 15 out of 20 for scheminess, which is one of our highest scores. Our next category is shock factor. How shocking was this man? Well, he tried to abolish the concept of nobility.
True.
That was intense. He started off as a puppet and managed to make his way free. Basically, he retook the empire by using the Hephthalites, his traditional enemies, and then eventually defeated them. So that's interesting.
Impressive, yeah.
He also tried to change the structure of the empire for the better and tried to make it more Roman overall to make it easier to administer, which is just surprising. In the end, you could say it is shocking that he is so utilitarian with the Mazdakites. Where, like, he picks them up, and as long as they're useful, okay, great, they're doing fine. Yeah. But as soon as they start to be against him, he ensures that they're all captured and executed. That makes sense, but, you know, it is kind of shocking, I expect. You know, the fact that he didn't just say, oh, no, this is the line I'm treading, and this is it. I feel like he does have quite a bit speaking for him in that direction. So he has a lot of being pro-Roman, massively attacking the nobles, taking the empire in a civil war, and, I mean, it's not even a civil war, but, you know, marching Hephthalite troops into the capital and just taking it back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty good, I'd say. I'm thinking a 6-ish. No. Again, the Mazdakite thing is too big. I think I'm going to go to an 8 or something. I could be convinced higher or lower.
No, I think an 8 makes sense. I will go for an 8 too.
Yeah, fair enough. So great, with an 8 and an 8, we get a 16 out of 20 for shock factor, which, again, pretty high score. Our next category is Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire in general and Iran in particular? Well, he did a lot of very good things for the Empire. That's pretty impressive. So,
lay it on me.
So yeah, let's start with he stopped being a puppet. Yeah. That's good for the Empire.
You know, having a capable, active king. Yeah.
Yeah, having a king who is actually king is good. He managed to avenge his father Peroz's defeat and reconquer the lands lost to the Hephthalites. That's pretty cool. He managed to get a bunch of tribute from the Romans.
Nice.
Which is nice. He managed to defeat them in the first big war in a long while.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. He reformed the empire. Well, he did the usual founding cities, expanding irrigation and infrastructure. That's always great. He tried to weaken the power of the nobility overall. He established a new taxation system so that the government now knows how much money they'll make every year, and they can predict and make more long-term plans, which is helpful for them. He also reformed the army so that it wasn't under the control of a single powerful lord, but it was essentially divided into 4 groups, into 4 quarters of the empire, and that could be more specialized as an army and also just more unlikely for somebody to take complete control as they could before. He also created a new contingent of the royal army formed of minor nobles that could just be loyal to the king himself and nobody else. He ordered a massive cadastral survey of the empire so that he could know what everybody owed and that they weren't working on old information and that everybody was fine with this. It wasn't entirely completed in his lifetime, but it will be very useful to those coming after him.
Mm-hmm.
He then managed to secure the succession, having his son Khosrow be very clearly made the heir, which was good.
We'll see if it works out, because
we'll see how that goes.
We have a history of
ignoring
ignoring this, but...
Yes. And then he managed to sort of clamp down on the Mazdakite threat before they became too much of a problem.
Yeah.
On the downside, externally, he doesn't have any outrageous victories. He's still paying the Hephthalites for protection money. It's less than before, and we got some lands back, but they're still being paid, probably. He introduces the Mazdakite problem to the Empire.
Yep.
Before him, it wasn't a thing. He gives them enough legitimacy that they can cause the chaos they want. There are some peasant revolts. They're ransacking lands. That's not ideal for stability. Then there isn't too much more bad about him. He dies before managing to conclude a peace with the Romans, but that's not his fault. He just got sick.
Yeah.
You know?
How dare he die?
Yeah, it is better when there is a succession to just, make a peace and make sure that everything is as smooth as possible, but, that wasn't his fault. So overall, Ehrenstein, very, very good. We have a lot of reforms to the Empire, a lot of impressive work being done. I think I'm floating between an 8 and a 9, based on how much trouble did he cause with the Mazdakites.
Yeah, that is really the main, bad thing.
Yeah, because it was useful, it helped him get the reforms, but also now you have a bunch of religious fanatics that want to abolish the concept of monarchy and nobility, and, well, you're the king, so, that's suboptimal.
As a king, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, of course, as king. But, yeah, I'm thinking, so 8 or a 9, what are your thoughts here? How are you oriented?
What could have gone better? The Mazdakites.
The Mazdakites could have gone better.
Yeah.
He could have just
the problem with
used them and made them disappear, but they're still around. The Hephthalites are still a bit of an
Hephthalites.
issue. I'd say the main thing that could have gone better is that he could have defeated the Hephthalites hard enough that he didn't need to give them tribute.
Yeah.
And he could have ended the Mazdakite threat entirely.
True.
I feel that given those two main things that could have gone better, I'll go for an 8.
Same, yeah.
Where it's
because they're
good,
pretty big things,
but
not just
you're leaving some issues. The war with the Romans is going great. We're doing very fine, but
no, overall, good job. But
Yeah. So with a 8 and an 8, we get a 16 out of 20 for Ehrenstein. Our next category is Face of Faces. What do you think this man looked like?
Well, I'll need a moment, but I'll let you know.
Kavad has 2 crowns. Pokemon Evolution. Okay, so Sarah has finished their drawing. Let me pick it up and I'll describe it to you all. Ooh, love it. Very good. So, what we have is a follow-up from our previous drawing, where we have Sukra as before. He is standing. He looks the same. Shortish hair, shortish beard. But this time, he has a noose around his neck, and he is being dragged out of the court, as we saw before, by Kavad, our boy who is holding the rope and saying, "Enough of you," as he wears a glorious crown and looks as much as a king as he should, with his beautiful crown with crenellations, a half moon in the front, a half moon holding a sphere on top, and tiny little diadem tassels.
I'd love to see these crowns, actually,
that
to
would
see
be cool.
what they look like in 3D after so many simplified representations.
That would be nice. I don't think we have any. I know mythically one was brought to the Kaaba in Mecca.
Uh-huh.
Because of things that will happen.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's still there. I think in the intervening millennium somebody took it. But yeah. But yeah, so thank you, Sarah, for the lovely drawing. If any of you would like to see it, you can go to the episode notes in the description, on our Discord if you're a patron, or on our website in Sarah's Portrait Gallery. Also, I think that if Sarah, you agree, we should give an honorable mention with a VIP seat for Sukra.
Yeah.
Because he did do some pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, he's still a selfish, greedy noble, but
Yeah.
he also did save the Empire.
He did something good. He saved the Empire. He deserves that bit of recognition.
And also, I'm not saying that the monarchs are not also greedy and selfish.
No,
So,
we're just looking at their point of view.
yeah.
Now let me show you what he actually looked like. We have a plate, which are always fun.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. What do you think?
Ooh, cool. I love these.
These are nice. I like them.
Okay, so it's a plate in silver and gold colors
Mm-hmm.
of Kavad on horseback, riding with like the carcage of arrows like on his side, and I don't know if he's supposed to be shooting a bow, but the bow is on the other side of the horse.
Yeah.
Of the head of the horse.
You can only
so
see the tip
yeah.
of the bow.
And he's got like a cool halo behind his head, and the crown and the diadem like billowing behind him, as well as his hair, which is really long, which actually is so cool. Maybe I should have given my portrait long hair.
Yeah, apparently.
And there are rams around him fleeing from this hunter, and like one of them seems to have fallen. It's a cool hunting scene. It's like really awesome. I like this.
It is really nice. I also like there are several things I like. I like the fact that they're using silver and gold together. That's neat. I think
like all the figures are in gold and the background is in silver.
Yeah, exactly. But I also like that there are details are made in silver, like the ram's horns are made in silver.
Yeah.
And what's it called? What is it called where you have arrows?
Is it a carcage? That's what I call it, but I don't know if that's the English word for it. That's what it's called in Spanish, at least.
In Italian, it's called a faretra, but
The where you put the arrows.
the quiver, that's what it's called. There we go. That's a terrible name, but quiver. So yeah, the quiver has like gold and silver stripes on it. I like that. I think that's cool. I also like how the horse's front right leg is in 3D, but the front left one is sort of like only etched into the plate. I think that's a cool detail.
Doing reliefs is really, really difficult because you are able to do things in 3D, but you can't make the whole thing in 3D. So you need to like choose how much of a 3D-ness is going to have.
Yeah. I also like that the horse has a little like poof of hair as well. It's just tied up in the front. So I think it looks really cool. I think it's just a good
It is really awesome
overall.
I will go pretty high for this one. I forget what I gave other plates, but yeah.
Other plates, well, let me see. So he gave Bahram the fifth, who had a nice plate, a 9 out of 10, because we also had a story for the plate.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
Yazgur the first also had a good plate. You gave him a 9. So, yeah, that's what a good plate is. Hormuz the third had a good plate, so you gave him an 8.
Yeah, I think I might go for an 8 as well, because it is pretty cool.
I think, 8 is good. It's not a never seen before Marvel, but it is pretty good. I like it.
And contemporary, which...
Yeah. So with an 8 and an 8, we get a 4 out of 5 for Face of Faces. Our next category is lengthiness. For how long do you think this man reigned?
Ooh, well, a lot happened. He was in his 50s when he started thinking about an heir.
Yeah.
And I guess he started his reign young-ish because they wanted to use him as a puppet king.
Yeah.
So, like, that is a few years already. I'm going to say 30 years?
Reigned quite a bit more than that. He reigned for a total of 41 years.
Oh my god, let's go. I was being conservative with my guess because I'm like, I don't know, sometimes I go way too high and then, you know.
He had time to do a lot of things with an interregnum of 2 years in between. So he reigned from 488 to 496.
Right.
Then was in prison for 2 years. Then from 498 to 531.
It's impressive that he,
opened up a new century.
After being imprisoned, managed to come back as king.
Yeah, he came back and stayed for 30 years, which is pretty cool. So yeah, take 41 years divided by 10. That gives him a 4.1 out of 5 for lengthiness. And that brings us to the final score, which is a grand total of 70.1, making him the second best Sassanid after Shapur II.
That tracks.
And in general skills, he is just... a point and a half below Alexander the Great and above Shapur I. So he is in pretty august company. He is our 1, 2, 3, 4. He's our 5th best king so far. So that's pretty cool. Good for him.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the final question, which is to say, is he reformer enough? Is he religiously weird enough? Is he heroic enough to be called a Shahanshah, or is he just a Shahanah?
I don't know. It was really cool. I feel like he did a lot.
I think I'm definitely on it, yes, because he just did. It's just like so wild that he decides, you know what the solution to nobles is? Communism.
Yeah, and also
Let's
he
try
did
that.
go to prison and then come back. I will
he
give
went to
it
the
to
Fortress of
him.
Oblivion. It was cool. He did a lot of very
story.
cool stuff. He reformed the empire. It's great. I think it was a good one. So
Yeah, I apologize for my apathy. I don't know why I was a bit like, eh.
It's good. It's great.
I guess because we've had more like intense stories in other episodes.
True. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, that's what the final showdown is for, but I think he definitely deserves to be in the company of other great ones.
True.
Okay, so congratulations, Kavad. You are a Shahanshah. You can go into the Paradise Gardens and meet your father, Peroz I, and tell him that he was avenged.
Yes,
you managed
at last.
to take revenge for him, and now the Empire is stronger, more stable than it has been in centuries.
That is so cool. Some things
and we are
worked,
opening
some
a
things
new
didn't,
age.
but hey, overall, we're better off, so.
Yeah, very much so. So there we go. That is the end of today's episode. We hope you had a good time with it. And we hope you'll join us next time, where we're covering not Khosrow, as you might expect, but Jamasp, because he did rule for 2 years in the middle of Kavad there, so he still technically counts.
I see, okay.
So we're going a little bit back in time. We're doing a weird thing because of the
Right,
split
because they
reign,
had to
but,
have a new ruler, and we need to see...
Yeah, exactly. It's his brother. We can see what happened. I mean, we kind of know what happens, but we can see about the detail how that was going. And then we'll jump into Khosrow.
Did Kavad execute him?
Kavad blinded him.
Right, but didn't execute him.
Probably, but yeah. We're not certain. He probably blinded him. So you can join us next time to find out there. And in 2 weeks, there will be Khosrow, Anushiravan, who will find out what is he like? What's his deal?
Yeah.
How does he deal with the rejection of not being adopted?
Yeah.
How does he deal with the Mazdakites? How does he deal with everything? Will he survive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, join us to find out in a couple of weeks. And next week to see Jamasp and more context on what's going on. So that'll be good.
Hell yeah. Exciting.
In the meantime, if you'd like to support us, there are multiple ways to do that. You can join us on Patreon, where you get a bunch of extra episodes. We just released last week the episode on Ptolemy III, with the whole Library of Alexandria and a lot of interesting things about the Ptolemaic Empire. And next month, we're going to be having Pompey the Great. That's going to be exciting.
Damn.
I'm doing the research on that now. There's a lot of stuff there, but hey, it's cool. And we get to see what he did in the East. That's fun. And otherwise, we have a bunch of older episodes you can look into. And, well, it's always great to know more about the world around Iran and what's going on at the same time that our kings were there. If instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, that's fine, but we'd appreciate if you could give us a review on your podcast app of choice, so you let other people know that we exist, and that brings more people to find out about the coolness that is Kavad and all of our recent friends. So hopefully that's good for you. In that case, without any further ado, we hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.